Hello, I'm really glad you are watching this, and I have something really cool to talk to you about. But first, I would really like to invite you to subscribe to this YouTube page. We have some really cool stuff that we plan to roll out on this channel this year, and it would make a big difference to us if you got notified as soon as we did that. So please help us as an added benefit to this whole thing. If we hit 100 subscribers on this channel, my wife Megan and I are going to record a video of ourselves eating an umeboshi shisu. I'm sure I'm saying that right, which is some sort of Japanese pickled plum that is said to be one of the sourest things that you can eat on the planet. So please subscribe and ask your daughter to subscribe, and your father and your grandmother, and create accounts for them so that you could subscribe for them and that they could see the content that we post here. My name is Drew, and I want to talk to you about the other day. I have some notes here. I hope that's okay. Every week for a good portion of my life now, I've prepared some kind of message or sermon or thought to share with a group of friends in a church. It's just a role that I've played in life. I've almost never stood in front of a group of people in 14 years or so without a plan for what I was going to say. I would recommend that way to everyone. And the first Sunday of 2020 was really no different than that. On the night before, I sat down with my wife and I shared with her what I was planning to share with the rest of the church. We do this almost every week. I love to get her insight on things. She has great jokes and great stories and a totally different perspective than mine. If you're in a relationship, I'm sure you're in a relationship like that where you're kind of like, yeah, they're different than me. They see things differently. If you're in a relationship where that's not true, how do you decide who's going to drive the minivan when you go places, right? You mostly are attracted to people who are different than you. And she just makes my messages better. And on this night, I was reading parts of the message to her, and she kept interrupting me, kind of a lot. And before I even got to the end of the message, the big finish, she just says something to the effect of, "Are you sure that's how you want to start the decade?" And I'm like, well, yeah, that was the plan. That's why I wrote it down. That's why I put it in the worship guides. That's why I told people that's what I was going to share. Would you suggest that I talk about something else? And she replied with something very kind to the effect of, no, just do that one, but do it better and also change it. So this sparked a long conversation about the Church of the Risen Jesus and about our personal life and about our personal relationships with Jesus. And she shared with me that God had put a specific word on her heart, like one specific word. And that's a little unusual for her and for us. Really, we're not really like that. And I want to share that word with you. I shared it the other day with the church family when we were gathered, and I don't know if there'll be anything particularly profound to you when you initially hear this word. I will say that after I shared this on a Sunday, that 3 people in our church family came up to me afterwards and said that they had heard God speak something similar to them in the previous week. In fact, 2 of them even said that God had spoken the same word. They had actually heard the same word from God. And so Megan told me that she was praying for her family and friends and for the church, and felt like God just kept inviting her to live this year with expectancy. So do with that what you will, right? I think part of the point of an invitation from God like that is that it's so personal. It's almost unspecific. This is God saying, I want to talk to you. So I, Drew, can't tell you what to expect. But maybe I could offer you a little bit of perspective on how to live with expectancy. And so I want to share something with you really, really quickly. 1 Kings chapter 19, starting in verse 11. This is something you're probably familiar with. The prophet Elijah speaks for God to a group of people, and he's going through a particularly difficult season, and he needs to hear from God. And so he asks God, like, what am I supposed to do about all of this? And God's response is this, verse 11, "Go out and stand before me on the mountain," the Lord told him. And as Elijah stood there, the Lord passed by, and a mighty windstorm hit the mountain. It was such a terrible blast that rocks were torn loose, but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, there was a fire, but guess what? The Lord wasn't in the fire. After the fire, there was the sound of a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak and he went away. The prophet Elijah went to this mountain with expectancy. He wanted to hear from God personally. And when he got there, wild stuff started happening, right? Chaotic things started happening. And perhaps those things were from the enemy. I mean, it says they weren't God wasn't in the wind. If it's not God, then maybe it is the enemy. Maybe it's just a plot to try to get him off of this mountaintop and get him out of this state of expectancy, but he stands strong. Elijah stands firm, and he stands quiet until he hears God's gentle whisper. There's a lot going on in your life right now. I know there's a lot going on in mine too. There are windstorms, and you know, it's kind of nice that God's not in the windstorm, because I can't make a windstorm happen, and I can't stop a windstorm from happening. It's kind of nice that God's not in an earthquake, because I can't make an earthquake happen. Like, if I needed to hear from God, and like, well, God's in earthquakes, I got to make an earthquake. It's kind of nice, right? That's kind of a good thing. There's a lot going on that you can't control. You can't control the stock market. You can't slow your aging. You can't even lick your own elbow. Go ahead and try it. But one thing you can do, and I think maybe we could learn from the prophet Elijah here, maybe we could learn from this story. One thing you can do is you can create some space to be quiet, to listen, to, with great expectancy, turn off the screens and get some space away from everything else, the hustle and everything in your life, just to seek the presence of God, to listen for God's voice, and to expect Him to have something to say.